We just finished chapter 38, which was looking at the opposite of the 3 chapters we've come from. So we spent 3 chapters learning about a physical mitzvah and how that is actually the point of creation. That is why the world was created. And we learned about how a mitzvah is so surrendered to Ratzon Ha'elyon, which is part of Keter, the highest point of the Sfirot. The mitzvah is so surrendered to that, which is basically God's inner will, that it can unite completely with the Ein Sof. And when we do the mitzvah, we are engulfed by that unity. We have a free pass to be as spiritual as Abraham and Sarah, and we can be like a chariot, because the mitzvah, unlike us, who have an identity and love and fear God with that identity, a mitzvah is totally transparent. It's completely surrendered. So it's got total bitul in a way we can't, surrender. And that's why a mitzvah allows us to actually elevate the world and make a home for God here, a dira b'tachtonim, in a complete way. Now in chapter 38, the Alter Rebbe is going to the other side and saying, now that we recognize how important the physical mitzvah is, and that is why the world was even created, now let's talk about your inner state when you're doing that mitzvah. Because we shouldn't, God forbid, become dry, rote people that do Jewish things just because we know the physical is all that matters. Once you're doing the physical mitzvah, now we're adding all kinds of light. And so if we're creating a home for God with a mitzvah, we now want that home to be a beautiful, lit home with lots of bright light and warmth. And that's from our feelings, from our emotions. This next chapter is going to go through in significant detail the techniques of how, once you've actually elevated a mitzvah and added kavanah and added your inner intention, how you can take that mitzvah and allow it to elevate throughout a system of spiritual worlds that exist above us. And whether you're using one kind of kavanah or another determines whether that mitzvah can unite up to a higher or higher world. So this is one of the more technical chapters, and I do want to, we can kind of skim through and say, never mind that jargon, never mind those words, never mind, that those angels we just talked about, and skim over it. But I'd like for anyone who wants to give a chance to really understand each piece, because the Alter Rebbe goes through quite a few different systems of cosmic Kabbalism. And to really get the depth of this chapter, you want to have a bearing. So bear with me. It might be a little complicated, but I want to give those who want to really go deeper a sense of what we're about to learn. And to do that, I'm going to open up and share my slides. So give me a moment. Share screen went somewhere. There you go. So we looked at a physical mitzvah versus the kavanah. And let's skip over this page. This is basically chapter 38, where the mitzvah is letting you see through that God is behind the world, and the kavanah is allowing the light to shine into where we are. All right, so see the past few classes if you're curious about that. Where I want to start today is everything that we're talking about, last chapter and this chapter, is divided into 4. And that's because everything is deriving from the 4 letters of God's name. So I want to go back to the 4 letters of God's name and go through all kinds of 4s that the Alter Rebbe is bringing in these chapters. 4 levels of mitzvahs, 4 categories of created things, and they correspond to each other. And you'll see all these also correspond to the 4 letters of God's name, because all of creation is flowing out of God's speech, which comes from God's name. So the 4 letters of inanimate we went over last time, you'll remember, were inanimate, plants, animals, and humans. Those are the 4 levels of creation, 4 categories of created things. And we said, and we won't go back over this, but we're reviewing the last chapter, this corresponds to the 2 lower being mitzvahs done, action mitzvahs done without deep kavanah, and speech and thought mitzvahs done without deep kavanah. So those are the 2 lower categories of when you do a mitzvah, how much you elevate it, without any deep emotions, but they're still done with intention of doing a mitzvah. And Those are like inanimate objects and plants. And then if I add my kavanah, now the mitzvah is going up higher, as we'll learn. And those correspond to two kinds of kavanah. One that's just revealing a hidden love that's in me that we discussed last week. And a second that is my own intellectually generated kavanah. So I don't want to review those concepts in depth. If you look at the last couple of classes, then you can catch up with us. Now, I want to show you where all this comes from, because the four-letter word of God that we're going to be using in this class, which we're going to call Havaya. That's in Kabbalah and Hasidus, they don't say the name of God, so you just say Havaya. It's kind of like a shorthand of it. So Havaya, the four-letter name of God that all this is emerging from, actually comes out of the 10 Sfirot that we learned about. So if it becomes too complicated, don't worry, you can still learn the chapter with us. But for those that followed and learned the Kabbalah and read my teacher Laibl's book, you'll find this, I hope, as interesting as I do. The 10 Sfirot develop into the four letters of God's name, and the four letters of God's name emerge out of that, up in the world of Atzilus, as we'll learn. And then each of those letters dominates one of the four categories of spiritual worlds, whether that be levels of the soul, whatever it is. And we'll learn about that. So I want to show you first how Havaya emerges from the Sfirot. And when you've learned Kabbalah and you see how it fits so beautifully with the letters, I think you'll love this. So back to my screen. Oh, I shared the wrong thing. Pardon me. Stop share. Screen share. This. There you go. So Havaya emerges from the Sfirot and creates four categories. And the Alter Rebbe is going to go through several different sets of categories that come out of those four letters of God's name. The first set of four the Alter Rebbe refers to are the four spiritual worlds that we've talked about many times. We went over them at the end of last class. So if you want to hear a detailed description of each of these spiritual worlds, they are more and more abstract worlds. Asiya, we're calling the world of action. It's dominated by physical action. Yetzira is the world of formation. It's a completely spiritual world dominated by just form. Bria, this third world out, is the world of creation and is dominated by just the possibility for created beings. So the beings in Bria, their only reality is that they're no longer nothing. Now they're not nothing. But they're not even something so much that they have form. They're that abstract. So it's hard to comprehend what that is. And whereas Asiya is dominated by action and Yetzirah by emotion, Bria is dominated by intellect. And the fourth world is Atzilus, which is really just godliness. That's a world where it's basically next to God, it's emanation from God, and it's not even separate from God. You don't even have the concept of a separate created being in that world. So those are the four spiritual worlds we'll be talking about in this chapter. Another category of four, also coming from the Havaya, the four letters, are levels of angels. And here it's not exactly four, but he'll talk about which angels tend to live in which worlds. And the main worlds we're talking about are Yetzirah, which is the world of emotion, and the majority of angels called Chayot live in the world of Atziya, and they just are instinctive emotional beings that have one drive. They either love God or they fear God, and they have one mission. And so that comes into the conversation. And then higher angels that live in the world of Bria, which are another category of Chayot, but also called Sfirot, which, Seraphim, thank you. They're called Seraphim, and Seraphim comes from burnt up. They have such a lofty level of intellectual appreciation for godliness and such love and awe from that they consume themselves practically. So the angels we'll hear about also are on the levels of Yetzirah and Bria, but also exist in the four worlds to some extent. Another level we'll be talking about are the four levels of the soul. The four levels of the soul. So just like there are four worlds that my soul is going through up in as it extends through the spiritual, those worlds each have a level of my soul that lives in them as a being, so to speak. And so those 4 levels, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and Chaya, and there's a 5th level we won't get into, those 4 main levels also correspond to the 4 letters of God's name and are discussed in this chapter. And finally, you have the 4 letters in Havaya, a Yud and a He, and then a Vav and a He. So I don't want to get lost in the details of each one of these sets of 4, but I want you to understand that each of these 4 come from the 4 letters of Havaya's name, of Yud and K and Vav and K. And now we're going to kind of go through the letters and see how they come out of the Sfirot. So I just want to make sure everyone's following. Is it clear? Everybody understand how we're talking about 4 categories, several categories of 4 levels, all coming from those 4 letters? Is that clear? Any questions? Morning, Michelle. How are you? Thank you for watching. Let me know any questions on Facebook as well. Good. So now I want to take you, this is probably one of the most complex little bits that we're going to do today. So if you don't follow this because you haven't learned the Sfirot yet, feel free to skip by the next 5 or 6 minutes. But I want to show those that have been learning with us the beautiful way that the 4 letters of God's name actually are flowing out of the Sfirot and correspond to the Sfirot. So let me share my screen one more time. Beautiful. So here's a map of what we saw before, or the map of our soul flowing up through all these 4 levels. And if you can, in your mind, also add the levels in here, we have the 4 worlds, Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, and Silut. Our soul itself has 4 levels within those worlds. There's certainly many, many angels that are emotional angels. We'll learn about the Chayot here in Yetzirah, and higher Chayot and Serafot here in Bria, and also to some extent in other worlds. And also the 4 letters of God's name, they exist here in Atzilut. That's where God's name is, but their light shines and dominates in these different worlds. So the whole thing is flowing out of this 4-letter name of God. And if you can picture the 10 Sfirot flowing through them, you'll see because the 10 Sfirot are creating that name of God, they're also flowing through each of these worlds and emanating as their particular letter in God's name in each of the worlds. All right, here we go. So if you remember, you may want to review, if you learned with us, the 10 Sfirot. And if you're not clear, you could go and watch our Intro to Kabbalah class that's on the YouTube channel and join. We have about 1,000 hours every month of learning happening on Temple Israel's YouTube channel for all these Kabbalah classes. So please join the many people in Michigan and elsewhere that are learning with the classes we posted with our group. But the way Havaya flows out of the Sfirot starts with the letter Yud. If you've learned with us, the letter Yud corresponds to Chokhmah, corresponds to the first of the Sfirot, which is that inspiration within consciousness of any new appreciation of reality of any kind. So any aha, any light bulb, that is this point that is in the Yud, and the Yud is shaped kind of like a floating point. That's what it is. So that is the first letter of God's name, and it flows out of the first Sphira of Chokhmah, which it corresponds to. We're not going to talk too much about Da'at or Keter, because Keter is the little kut, so little point on top of the Yud, corresponds to Keter, but let's not get complicated with that. Just know Keter exists in that thorn on top of the Yud. What happens when I take a Yud, and I take the point and I stretch it down to make a line? What letter would that look like? That would look like, you guessed it, a Vav. So the Yud, to make a Vav, you just take a Yud and you stretch it down, and a Vav is in fact the letter that allows the point of realization of any being to now stretch down and relate to something beneath it, or some very abstract concept to be stretched down so lower consciousnesses can relate to it. So that's what a Vav does. A Vav takes this point of creation within God and starts to stretch it down so that the world can relate to it better. It corresponds to the 6 midot. The 6 midot. So when you're in the Sfirot, that's Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Those 6 midot correspond to the Vav. Of course, what's the number value of Vav is 6. So 6 midot for the letter Vav, which is value 6. And what does an emotion do? It allows an intellectual idea, which is just within me, which is my own, me relating to myself, to now relate to something outside of me, right? An intellectual idea I just have inside myself. An emotion I have about something outside myself. So it's taking my intellect and it's drawing it down so that I can generate emotions and relate that intellect to the world around me. Because an intellectual idea is within me, an emotion is about me with something else. It's drawing it down. And now finally, here's my 6 midot coming in. Nice graphic. And finally, what's a hay? We're going in geometry here. A hay represents expansion. So whereas a vav represents drawing down and related to something below, hay now represents, okay, I've drawn it down, now I want to expand it so it has presence, life, reality on that new level. If you look at it like geometry, what's happening? I started with the point of Chochmah of the Yud. I drew it into a line with the Vav. You take a point and draw it across, you get a line. But now look at the hay. The hay has a second direction that's moving, this leg of the Daled in the hay that's drawing it down. What happens when you take a line and draw it down in a second dimension? You get a square. See my square there? But I don't want to stop there. I'm living in 3 dimensions, so I take my square and I draw it up, as it were, in a 3rd dimension. And that is what this Yud is, sort of projecting out of the surface of the page. And now my square projected in the 3rd direction becomes a cube. Right, so if you go through that, you see the hay represents the point of Chochmah being drawn into 1, 2, 3 dimensions until it becomes a cube and it's expanded from its original state of a point. In the name Havaya, the hay represents, the first hay represents Bina, that aspect of cogitation that allows Chochmah to expand into details. And it also represents the second hay, which is Malchut, which is speech, which means my emotions now open up and expand into expression. So again, we can't go deep into that. If you wanna get the background on the 10 Sfirot, watch our intro to Kabbalah, that's on our channel. But this is how Havaya flows out of the hay. The hay is both Bina and also Malchut. So let's look at it in terms of the actual name Havaya and review. The Yud is, so we have a higher hay and a lower hay, so you see the 2 sides of the name. We got Keter, which also corresponds to Dat. We won't talk about higher and lower Dat, but they're the same things. That's why they're both on that thorn. Chochmah here is in the Yud. Bina develops into the hay, which is this 3-dimensional expansion of the point of Chochmah. Then my midot, Ches, Gevur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, that is the Vav, develops into the Vav. And finally, Malchut is the hay of God's name. So you may have to go over this. We're not going in depth, but if you follow this and look over, you'll see how the 4-letter name of God emerges out of the 10 Sfirot. And this is God's name as it is in Atzilus, in the world of godliness. So that's where God's name is and develops. Now each of the letters has a particular light that will shine down and dominate each of the worlds, as we'll learn. The Yud will dominate the highest world. The Hay will dominate the world of Bria, the intellectual world. The Vav will dominate the world of Yetzira, emotions. And the final Hay dominates the world of Asiya, of action. So when we're looking at the spiritual worlds, this is what they correspond to. Asiya, Yetzira, Bria, and Atzilut are the 4 letters going upwards. And for the levels of our soul, here the terms are Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and Chaya. That is the higher and higher levels of my soul that also flow out of God's name and correspond to those 4 letters. It's a lot. So we may want to you may want to go back and review that. But any questions just on the basics that we're talking about here? Was anything confusing in particular?
All of it.
Pardon me, Paula?
Well, could you give us charts, what we just showed? Could we get copies of that? Because that makes more sense.
Yeah, I'll have my scan these and send them out so you can review them. And they're also on the video if you want to rewatch. They're posted. I can have Maya send them. But
thank you.
Yes, Noreen.
I'm having trouble with the Sphirot being there before the name.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you're talking.
Which
I'm
one's
sure
first?
there's places where the name is there before the Sfirot, and it's
Yeah.
all united with God, and what's first and what's second.
Yeah.
But in terms of the four-letter name of God and how it creates the four levels, there it is the name of God flowing out of the Sfirot. The Sfirot are completely united with the Ein Sof, and a name is a name, right? It's the most transcendent name of God, but still, when you're talking about God and godliness, my name is you could take my name, put it on a piece of paper, and tear it up. I won't like it, but you didn't tear me up, right? So you're right that in other places, in other conversations, you couldn't say that God's name comes out of the Sefirot so much, but in terms of this conversation, it is accurate. Right. So let's plow on. So we'll have at least a snapshot of these four categories that we're using throughout this chapter.
Michael, real quickly, yes. I know when we first started studying Tanya, it was the whole idea of becoming a Bainani. How does all this reflect in? Are we still striving to be a Bainani, or what's really going on here? How does that coincide with all of this?
Yeah, good question to keep in mind. So the first section of the Tanya, with the short path and the long path and different systems of meditation and the mind controlling the heart, that was the technique of how to be a Bainani. Since then, we've been learning troubleshooting. For instance, how to make sure you're in a state of joy, what to do if you have any kind of depression. And we learned about the philosophy. Why should we be doing this? Because that's why the world was created. But all these chapters now are really for people that now are putting into place chapters 1 through 25, and are functioning at the level of a Bainani. And now we're getting advice as a Bainani. How can I elevate my mitzvahs in the best possible way? How can I have the deepest kavanah? How can I keep myself, growing and changing my insides to match my outsides? But really, the Alter Rebbe intended this for someone now who is a Bainani and who's putting into place those chapters. Now, realistically, most people don't get to that level, so we can also have a great benefit from learning these chapters at our level and learning how to do our mitzvahs with more kavanah, and we can still elevate them to different worlds. But this is not now forgetting about the mind controlling the heart and thought, speech, and action. We're supposed to be a Bainani at this point in our lessons from the Alter Rebbe. So, let me know if you're a Bainani right now. I'd love to figure out how you did it. That's all I can say. All right, let me finish this off before we go inside the text. So here we have again the levels of the soul as they correspond to the four letters of God's name. And now you can look again at the Sfirot that we learned as they emerge as a human being. And you can see that, again, this is a map of the same thing. So if I'm showing you the four letters of God's name, or I'm showing you this, it's really a map of the same thing. The Chokhmah is the Yud, Bina is the Hey, Dad and Keter is the thorn on the Yud, Vav are Chesed through Yesod, and the Hey is Malchut. So even if we don't remember each connection, I just want you to get the sense that really these are all maps of the same thing, and Havaya is emerging from the Sfirot, and the four worlds are emerging from the four letters, and the four levels of the soul are emerging from the four letters, and the angels where they are is emerging from that, and everything the Alter Rebbe refers to. I just want to have a little anchor so you don't hear it and have it kind of spin off somewhere. Right? So we can go through Chokhmah, Bina, Dat. For anyone who is not familiar, is wisdom, understanding, knowledge. The Midot, loving kindness, strength, and beauty. Victory, acknowledgement, and foundation, and the last Hey being royalty. And let's let go of anger. That was another presentation. So I'm going to stop share. Hi, I'm back. So with that in mind, I know that was a little more confusing. I'd rather be in a classroom and be able to kind of point to things. It's hard on Zoom. Any questions coming from Facebook? Hi, Mindy Shostak. Oh my gosh, blast from the past. How you doing? And hi, Sydney. So let me know if there's any questions. I'm watching your comments. Let's go inside The text is the Tanya by the Alter Rebbe. We're on chapter 39, page 549. Let's go right in. For this reason, מפני זה גם כן נקראים המלאכים בשם חיות ובהמות כדכתיב ופני אריה אל הימין וגומר ופני שור מהשמאל וגומר.
For this reason, too, the angels are called chayot, beasts, and behemot, animals, as it is written. And an angel with the face of a lion is to the right of the divine chariot, and the face of an ox is on the left.
So we're going to start with the angels. As we learn, angels exist on different levels. The main angels we're talking about are the second world of Yetzirah, because they're super emotional beings. But unlike us, although they're much, much loftier than us, they're higher than us, they don't have free choice. So while they have tremendous love for God or tremendous fear for God, the kind of love and fear that we couldn't even experience as physical beings in a human body, not even as a tzaddik, they don't accomplish what we can accomplish because they are just forced to love God and fear God. They don't have any choice. We have a very small measure of love and fear of God. We're lower than them. But the advantage we have, as you'll see, is that we have free choice. So that is why angels are called animals, because like animals, they're instinctive. They work primarily by nature, right? A squirrel in the wild is always going to climb trees and find food and be a squirrel. It's not going to turn around and decide another kind of life is better intellectually, and I'm gonna change my squirrel nature. A squirrel will be a squirrel, a fox will be a fox, and the fox will chase the squirrel. That's just, fox is not going to sit down and decide I want to be a different creature. That's what they are. They're instinctive. So below us, we have animals that are instinctive and can't make a choice to overcome their nature. And above us, we have angels that are also instinctive and can't make a choice to overcome their nature. And we in the middle, we actually have free choice where whatever our heart wants, we can actually, with our intellect, steer in the opposite direction. So that's why angels are called chayot, animals, because they share that instinctive nature with animals. They love God or they fear God, and boom, off they go. לפי שאינם בעלי בחירה ויראתם ואהבתם היא טבעית להם, כמו שכתוב בראיה מהמנה, פרשת פנחס.
For they have no freedom of choice between good and evil as man has, and their fear of God and love of God is natural to them. They need not create fear and love of God through intellectual contemplation of God's greatness. As it is written in Ra'aya Behima, Parashat Pincha, because their fear and love of God are natural and instinctive to them. They are compared to animals.
Make sense? So an angel does not have freedom of choice. They just are on a mission. And incidentally, that's why, very famously, we learn angels cannot have more than one mission. God wants 3 things done. You see 3 angels come, because each one is going to do something different. And their primary identity, most of these angels, is emotional, is love of God. And that's why in the blessings before the Shema, there's all these descriptions of the angels going, holy, holy, holy is God. They get excited and they call one to the other. Why do they have to call one to the other? Because this group of angels on the right is all about love, and this group of angels on the left is all about awe of God. And angels that are under Michael's camp, they just love God. They don't have the capacity to fear God intrinsically. If they want to experience some bit of fear of God, they got to call to these angels and say, hey, toss me over some of that awe so I can have some fear of God. And they're calling to each other because each one only has their mission. That's why they have to request permission from the other to use the other one of the Sfirot to praise God. If I'm an angel of Michael and I want to have some awe of God, I got to call to that side, hey, share some of that awe over here because that's not my mission. And they can kind of help each other out. So that's the key of angels. And now we'll learn why it is that a human being, although we're lower than an angel, we actually have a greater purpose than an angel, having to do with free choice. ולכן מעלת הצדיקים גדולה מהם, כי מדור נשמות הצדיקים הוא בעולם הבריאה ומדור המלאכים בעולם היצירה.
Therefore, tzaddikim are on a higher level than them, the angels. The abode of the souls of tzaddikim is in the world of Beriah, creation, whereas the abode of the angels is in the world of Yetzirah, formation.
So what is, as we discussed, what is free will? Free will really is having a quality of intellect that can overcome your nature. Having a quality of intellect that can overcome your nature. It's not because I'm more intelligent that I have more free will. That's not the case. You can have some animals that are very intelligent. Parrots, I understand, are very intelligent, and yet a parrot is always a parrot. And you might have a human being that, for whatever reason, has a lower capacity for intelligence, but if they're human, they still have the ability to overcome their nature. It's not degree of intelligence, and someone that's a genius does not have more free will than someone that has a normal intellect. It's the quality of human intellect, of having dominance over the heart and over the nature, that makes us a human. And that is the definition of free will. So because tzaddikim, who are able to use their intellect to create emotions, especially, are on the level of Bria, they're actually greater than the angels, and they're doing, as we'll learn, much more important spiritual work than even the angels are. And let's do this note. A little side here, because we're talking about chayot, but there's also higher angels. You got Michael and Gavriel, you got Seraphim. V'hayinu bistam malachim aval yesh malachim elyonim b'olam habriya she'avodatam b'tchilu rechimu sichlim. כמו שכתוב בראיה מהמנה, שם שיש שני מיני חיות הקודש, טבעיים ושכליים, כמו שכתוב בעץ חיים. I think we're at Maxine.
This is so only in the case of ordinary angels. There are, however, higher angels in the world of Beriah, whose service of God is with intelligent fear and love.
So just as a note, I know people love all this angelology, whatever you call it. There are higher angels that do actually have free choice of a certain kind and that operate with an intellectual capacity like humans. And those are in the world of Bria, so they exist too. But we don't have to go deep into those. וההבדל שביניהם הוא, כי בעולם היצירה מאירות שם מידותו של אין סוף ברוך הוא, לבדן, שאין אהבתו ופחדו ויראתו וכו'.
It is written so in Raya Machim that there are two kinds of holy chayot, instinctive and intellectual. Those who love and fear are instinctive, and those who create love and fear intellectually, as it is also written in Eretz Chaim.
And let's go on the difference to the bottom of the page, if you would.
The difference between Bria and Yetzirah is as follows. In Yetzirah, the only midot of the blessing of the Ein Sof radiate. Only the sfirot of chesed, kindness, gevira, severity, meaning the love of him, corresponding to chesed, dread and fear of him, corresponding to gevira, and so on, with other four midot.
Right, so let's just now we're getting into the worlds. So let me just remind us where we are. Oh, and I want to present. Right. So when we're talking about the four worlds, we're saying in the world of Yetzirah, it is the Vav, and it is the emotional sfirot, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, that dominate. And the difference between the world of Yetzirah, which comes from the Vav, or is illuminated by the Vav, and the world of Bria, is that Bria is illuminated by the Hey in God's name, which is intellectual expansion. And so Bria is a world of intellect. And that's why, because a Jewish person, or a tzaddik for sure, has intellectual capacity to create emotions, those emotions that power the kavanah of those mitzvahs, they're rooted in the intellect, and they'll ascend back to the world of the intellect, because that's where they came from. Whereas, if I just do it with natural love, as we learned last chapter, that now I'm being like an angel, which just has instinctive love, and now those emotions will power that mitzvah up just to the world of Yetzirah. וכמו שכתוב בתיקונים ועץ חיים דשית ספירין מקננין ביצירה, as is written
in Tikkuni Zohar and in Eitz Chaim, that the six sfirot, that is the six midot from Chesed through Yesod, nest in, that is, pervade the world of Yetzirah.
Right. So if you read the Zohar and you read the 6 Sefirot nest in the world of Yetzirah, what does that mean? That means that God's emotions, so to speak, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, that's the Vav of God's name. And although God's name is in Atzilut, the light from that Vav, the life force that's creating the world of Yetzirah, that comes from those 6 Sefirot. So that's how the Zohar speaks. Therefore, v'lechen zot hi avodat hamalachim tamid yomam v'layla lo yishkoto lamod b'yira v'fached v'chulu.
Therefore, this is the service of the angels, whose abode is in Yetzirah, as mentioned above, constantly, never ceasing, day or night, to stand in fear and dread of God.
As we learned about the angels, if you're an emotional being, where's your home going to be? In the world of emotions, in the world of Yetzirah. So that's why Chayot, angels, they live in that world of Yetzirah, and that's their task is loving God or having fear for God, depending on Vahinu kol machane Gabriel she mehasmol v'avodat machane Michael hu hava v'chulu. This refers. I think we're at Sharon. If you want to unmute, please.
I was reading away there on mute. This refers to the entire host of angels under Gabriel, which is on the left. Left represents the midah of Gevurah, which evokes fear and awe. Therefore, all these angels stand in constant fear of God.
And go on the service of the angels under Michael.
The service of the host of angels under Michael, on the other hand, is love of God. They stand in constant adoration of godliness, corresponding to the midah of Hesed, and so forth.
And this is a profound difference between humans and angels, and it really is about our role in the universe, and that is that we can include many different qualities within ourselves at the same time. When we say an angel can only have one mission, what does that mean? An angel, if it's love, it's love. That's all it is. It's not really going to have a sense of awe. Within us, we can do 3-4 things all at the same time. I can love someone at the same time as I have a sense of respect for them, at the same time as I have some compassion for where they're at, and all those emotions can exist within me at the same time. We don't realize, but that's different than the angels. The angels can't do that. In the physical, in just a minute, Sharon, in the physical, you can have 2 different objects that are the same, but because we're in space, they can be next to each other. I could have 2 exact pencils and they're the same pencil, and you say one pencil, another pencil, same pencil. Because I'm in physical space, I can say one's here and one's here, and there's 2 of them. In the spiritual, you can't have 2 of the same thing because there's no space. There's nowhere to put a second one of them, so to speak. So in the spiritual, the only thing that makes one being or angel or whatever different from another is that it has a different quality, different level of love, or awe versus love. And that's what defines it. It can't be something else. So whereas in the physical, I can actually take a number of qualities and put them all inside me because I include all of them, an angel can't do that. An angel is defined by its quality, and that's it. That's it. And if it had a different quality, it'd be a different angel. It wouldn't, you can't have the same angel with one quality in 2 places and say it's 2 angels that are the same. So that ability to include all the different sefirot emotionally within us, that's actually what makes us remarkable and great, and what allows us in the end to use our intellect to balance those emotions and do something different than our nature, and therefore create a kavanah that's, even though it's not as lofty in its position as the angels, they have a higher love and awe. Our kavanah, because it's from free choice, we'll see, creates a corresponding reaction from the Ein Sof, and a tremendous light flows through all the spiritual worlds. So an angel's loftier, but the work we're doing is transforming every level of the spiritual worlds in a way an angel can't touch. Yes, Sharon?
Well, the way I'm hearing this is that angels are unidimensional and humans are multidimensional, and we can multitask emotionally and they can't. They just are. Their type of angel is this, and that's it.
That's
There's
correct.
no
Good way of
change.
putting it.
They're,
Yeah.
they're unchangeable. They're immutable.
Yeah, that was my question. That could they change, or is there any, shall we say, higher form that would cause them to change?
Yeah. So as the Alter Rebbe said, you have angels in Bria. You have, archangels. You have seraphim, and they have intellect, and they have free choice, and they can change. But
Are-
your
are
typical
higher.
angel that you
Yeah.
hear about in the Torah, that's emotional being in Yetzirah. It has a mission. The mission doesn't change. And if the mission needs to change, if there's a different mission, that's a different angel by definition. So it's not so much that the angel can't change, it's that if it were to change, it wouldn't be the same angel. It'd be a different angel because different qualities in the spiritual mean different beings. That's the only way you differentiate between beings. There is no physical space to say they're in different places, so they must be different beings. It's all outside of space. So the only way you have different beings in the spiritual is if they have different qualities. So that's the question almost doesn't make sense. Can an angel change? That's a different angel in the spiritual, right?
So the names of the angels are not in the Torah. There's no named angels.
Right.
But, does it not come into a book of Daniel? Is that when it comes in, or?
You see them. You see them in the Siddur.
Yeah, but
certainly you see them, in the vision of Ezekiel's chariot, where the Chayot are holding up the chair. And we'll learn what the chair soon means the world of Bria, and the
but they
Chayot are
have
these
no
angels.
names.
Pardon me?
And do they have names in the book of Ezekiel? I can't remember.
Well, Chayot, I think, is in that text. So
Okay.
that's. Do you mean names like my name is Michael?
Like
You mean names like I'm a human?
Gabriel, Michael, yeah. I think it's just book of Daniel that comes in. Where do the rest of the names come in?
I'd have to do more research to know where the first mention of names are. I can't trace each one and tell you where they come from. It's a good question, but I don't know. I will say there's a lot of variety. If you look at, for instance, in Rambam's Mishneh Torah, there right at the beginning he goes through 10 levels of angels, and they're actually different than we're learning here. With him, I think Chayot are the highest. So when you're in the spiritual world, there's different ways of carving it up and assigning the names. But basically, they all agree that angels are, as you said, unidimensional beings that have one mission. The different levels are different ways of kind of parsing that out.
Are they like souls to the angels? Are they souls?
No, a soul is a piece of God, and an angel is a created being. So a soul is not a created. I mean, it has Yeshus, as we'll learn, but a soul actually is a piece of God that comes directly into the world. An angel is just a created being. It's higher than our souls typically are operating, but we're greater because we're actually a piece of God here in creation, and angels aren't that. Angels are just more spiritual. But aval beolam habriya meirot sham chochmato uvinato v'dato shel Ein Sof Baruch Hu shehein mekor hamidot ve'em v'shoresh lahen. I think we're at Paula.
But in the world of Beria radiate the Chachma, Bina, and Dat of the blessed Ein Sof, i.e. the upper three Sephirot, Chabad of Atzilut, which are the source of Mido and their mother and root.
As you hear, I just said that the Yud radiates in the world of Atzilus and the He in the world of Bria. And now he's saying that Chachma, Bina, and Dat, all of the intellect radiate in Bria. And that's because everything is inter-included. So in each world, when the He dominates the world of Bria, that is all the Sefirot within He, and certainly the Chochmah and Dat also intercluded within He. But as you see when we're counting the Sefirot, in a human, everything's inter-included, and in God. So each of the Sefirot that dominate a world, they include the other Sefirot as well. So the world of Bria, as opposed to the world of Yetzirah, is an intellectual world where the He, which includes also the Yud, Chochmah, and Dat within the Yud, the point of the Yud, that all radiates within Bria. But the main one of these letters in Bria is the He. That's Bria is a world of Bina, of intellectual expansion. And go on, as is written.
Me again? Okay.
Sure, yeah.
As is written in Tikkun Zohar, that Ima Ilav, the supernal mother, the Sephira of Bina, described as mother of the world of Atzilut, nests, radiates in the throne, meaning the world of Beria with 3 Sephirot of Atzilut, Chochmah, Bina, and Dat.
So you can imagine, sometimes we talk about the advantages and disadvantages of learning the Zohar. I don't teach the Zohar. I've only learned a little bit of the Zohar. And when I open it up, this is what you get. You get, the supernal mother nests in the throne. Okay. Where does that get me, right? Maybe if I'm a Kabbalist, it gets me, to somewhere. But it's very difficult to learn the Zohar because of this language. So let's translate it in terms of our text and how Hasidus brings out the inner light of it, right? Right, so the throne, as we said, refers to, in this case, intellect, Bria, because that is God not just being with God's self in unity, just godliness as in Atzilus, but God actually descending to create a world of created entities and relating to something else. So it's God coming down. So that's why whenever you see a throne, that means God's not standing up above, completely united just with God's self, but God sat down to relate to us, whether in judgment or whatever. So the throne refers to the world of Bria. So it's called Chorsia, or the world of Kiseh, the world of the seat. And Ima Ila'a, the supernal mother, that refers to Bina, or this hay. And so Bina is lighting up, and the vitality of the world of Bria comes from Bina and comes from the hay. That's kind of how you translate that poetic verse from the Zohar, that the supernal mother nests on the throne. That's how you translate it Kabbalistically. And looking at the Ezekiel's chariot, you have these same words, right? You have the throne, the seat on the Merkava, and the Chayot are lifting up the seat. So here you see the angels in the world of Yetzirah, the world below, are actually holding up this throne, which is the world of Bria, which is above them. So all that poetic language, it always comes back to the same structure of these 4 worlds and the angels in them, and how the Sfirot create the name of Vaya, and each of those letters and those Sfirot illuminate each of those worlds, and it's the same structure over and over again with different terms and language and poetry, etc. Any questions about that? That's a chunk there. You can see how this chapter we could spend a year on this chapter and take each paragraph and go in the background of each one. I don't want to get bogged down, but I do want to give you snapshots in case you want to do kind of further research. So just give you where it's coming from, and then not get stuck on any one point if we can. Because v'lachen hu medor nishmot hatzarikim ovdei Hashem bitchilu urchimu hanim shachot min habina v'dat digdulat ein sof baruch hu.
Because these 3 Sephirot, Chabad of the Ein Sof, radiate in the world of Bria, it is therefore the abode of the souls of the Tzaddikim who serve God with a fear and love that stem from understanding and knowledge of God's greatness.
Now let's get back to us and our work as trying to be a Beinoni. If I get myself to the level, and maybe it's just in a particular mitzvah, it's not me all the time, where I've meditated as we've learned using the oh my gosh, is it 11:30? I'm just getting started. Sorry. Okay, we'll do another few minutes, and then we'll do a little meditation. Okay, if people have to leave, let me know. I forgot. I get into this and time kind of slips away, but there you are. All right, so if I'm at a state where I'm meditating as we'll do in a moment, and I'm generating through that intellectual focus and filling my mind with a divine concept, I'm generating emotions. And then I spin my egregor and I give Shalach Manos with that sense of love and awe. Now, because those emotions, they originated from intellect, that's where they belong, and that's where the mitzvahs, as we'll learn, will elevate up to and unite, is up in the world of Bria. Even if I'm just a regular guy that's trying to do a mitzvah and I'm not a tzaddik, I can still use this same dynamic and technique of understanding that when I've generated the emotions through meditation, those are, as we'll learn, the wings of love and fear that can allow that mitzvah to elevate right up to the world of Bria. And the love is called She'ava zo nikra ruta deliba kaniskar la'el ume ruta deliba naseh levush lanshema ba'olam habriya shehu ganed en halyon kedil kaman uchmo shekatuv bazohar vayakel. So just take us to the bottom of the page. This love.
This love being called Reuta Deliba, the heart's desire, that is, a desire created by intellect as opposed to desire that transcends intellect, as mentioned above. From this Reuta Deliba, a garment is formed for the soul in the world of Bria, which is the higher Garden of Eden, as will be discussed further, and as is written in the Zohar, Parshat Vayachel. The lower Garden of Eden is in Yetzirah, and the higher Garden of Eden is in Bria.
So in the Zohar, they talk about a lower Garden of Eden and a higher Garden of Eden. And that matches as well with our model of four worlds. Yetzirah, the second world up, is the lower Garden of Eden. And that's where if you serve God and learn Torah and mitzvahs with a natural love, you'll create light in that world. And as you just learned, your soul will receive a garment where it can actually stand the light in that world, right? Where, I mean, when you're in heaven, it's like you're on a beach with a sun that is burning and with such incredible brightness that it would incinerate us if we didn't have protection. And so we need these garments to put them on, and then we'd be like, I'm comfortable now. It's beautiful. I can look at the sunlight, and it's just the right amount, and I'm warm and I'm happy. So to not be nullified by this tremendous light that happens in Gan Eden, we have to create these garments here by doing what we're doing, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. And then those garments are there for our souls when we're in heaven, and we can enjoy the light with the protection of those garments that allow us to get more and more of that light into our system. So you got a lower Garden of Eden, which is Yetzirah, but then there's a higher Garden of Eden, which is Bria. That corresponds to Bria. It again fits into our four worlds model. And if I've created intellectually generated emotions, now I'm going to get a garment for the world of Bria, which is going to allow me to endure an even higher intensity of light that for the beings in Yetzirah would just evaporate them. They couldn't stand its intensity, right? The world of Yetzirah can only take so much light. The world of Bria gets much more sophisticated garments to handle the light that's in the higher Gan Eden, as we'll learn. Yeah, these are choppy, chunky chapters, but you'll see we actually get to techniques that you can just use every day. You can be sitting in a restaurant, and you can be eating a meal, and you can be using these techniques to elevate everything around you, the food you're eating, maybe a book you have on the table. You can be at your home, hanging out with people, doing a holiday, and you can be using this technique just in real time with people, knowing you're focusing on elevating this particular mitzvah to a world. And it's all about your inner state. It's all about your ability to harness your own kavanah and to understand the difference between kavanah that's just instinctive and kavanah that is intellectually generated. So let's generate some kavanah. If you're with us, we have been meditating at the end of most classes. Hi, Alexa, good to have you. So find yourself in a comfortable position. You can close your eyes to focus on the inner. Let's allow our breath to open up gently and fully. So nice to breathe without a mask on here in this room with no one around me. And allow the breath, if you can, in and out through your nose with your mouth shut and breathing smoothly in, back out. Let's open up the 4 stages of breath. So breathe with me in, 2, 3, 4. Keep the breath in for another 2, 3, 4. Release the breath out, 2, 3, 4. Stay empty again, 2, 3. Let's repeat that, breathing in, 3, 4. Keep the breath in nice and full, 2, 3, 4. Release out through the nose, 2, 3, 4. The breath stays out, 3. Continue that cycle. Of course, the breath is the first appearance of the soul in the physical world, and the breath is always pulsating. The soul is always moving. So we're just evening out the flow of that soul. A nice, smooth, deep, even rhythm. Let's open up our Chokhmah gateway, the gateway for that point of the Yud. Our Chokhmah gateway, our wisdom gateway, is going to be the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. As you finish that in-breath, there's an emptiness, a hold. And then you breathe out. The space in there, that is our wisdom gateway. Please open it up. It's a natural thing. And let's now place in that wisdom gateway a beautiful image that we'll learn of two wings of a bird of love and God, of love and awe. Love is the wing on the right, fear and awe is the wing on the left. And those are two wings that will elevate all of my actions, all of my Jewish learning to these spiritual worlds we're learning about. So allow these two wings to fill up every part of your mind as you continue breathing smoothly. As you keep that image of those two wings in your gateway, let any details fill and expand in your mind. You can amplify the image you're seeing or sounds you're hearing from the image, amplify them 2 or 3 times so they're bigger and brighter in your mind's eye. As always, notice any feelings you're having that are generated from focusing on this beautiful image of the wings of my love and awe as they elevate all that I do. And you're now creating the tools that you can use throughout the day to elevate all your learning, this learning we're doing here, all your Jewish mitzvahs, to higher and higher within each of the spiritual worlds. This is the tool. It's of great value to stay here. It's of medicinal value. It's good for your body to be breathing like this. It's also of spiritual value if you have time to stay for 10 or 15 minutes. Let this image fill your wisdom gateway, fill your mind. But we'll need to finish, so you can open your eyes, wiggle your toes and your fingers. And thank you for joining us on User's Guide to the Soul. Once again, we have, like I said, about 1,000 hours each month of people learning here on our various classes. So if you're new, I hope you enjoyed joining us. There's lots of other classes already posted. And in particular today, like I said, the Intro to Kabbalah class will fill in a lot of the detail that we kind of skipped over like a stone over a lake. So we just touched on it. If you're curious, you got everything there waiting for you. So it's been beautiful. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to sign off of Facebook.
Bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
You'll let